Hi everyone, good morning. This is attorney Arkady Frekhtman, a New York City personal injury trial attorney, and today we are going to be talking about one particular recent case, a verdict, and it was a multi-million-dollar verdict, and it wasn't an easy case. It was a sports injury. So how did they do it? Find out. Let's get into it. So this was a case, the verdict came down at the end of March, and it was from San Diego, so California. Again, I know we've done a lot of cases, and a lot of the big cases seem to be coming out of California. And this case involved a really large verdict, nearly $50 million. So how did they do it? Basically, what happened was the plaintiff, his name was Jack, he was actually studying to be and about to become an instructor in surfing out in Costa Rica. But before that, he was also interested in other sports. So he started learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he was a student. And he ended up suffering a catastrophic, life-changing spinal cord injury. What happened was he was assigned a partner to do sparring. I remember, he was like a novice, meaning he was just getting started. He didn't know what he was doing. And he was assigned this partner who was a very, very experienced, excellent, jiu-jitsu fighter, who was like a world champion, really, really, advanced, experienced guy. So what happened was the plaintiff was a white belt, just complete novice, 23 years old, and he began his training that day. And his instructor gave him like a 10-minute warm-up, and then he said, let's do a 20-minute instructional period, and then we'll do a short sparring rotation. And he was paired with this instructor who's a second-degree black belt with multiple international championships, and the instructor's nickname was actually Sinister, and that means sinister. He's like I'm not going to say he's a bad guy, the instructor. He's obviously a great fighter, international champion. But what ended up happening was while they were practicing, the instructor put the novice, the plaintiff, into what's known as the turtle position. Now, the turtle position is just like what it sounds like. The person is balled up, they're on all fours, meaning their hands and their feet, with their face down on the mat. And if your opponent is in a turtle position, the goal usually is to safely put that person on their side. And that's known in the martial arts industry as taking the back. But what this guy did, this Sinistro guy, what he did was, instead of doing that, he crouched on the balls of his feet. So his heels were up and he's on the balls of his feet. Then he pins Jack to the mat, immobilizes his left arm. So now his left arm can't move at all. And then he launches himself up and over Jack, and he puts his entire body weight on the plaintiff's neck. And this extreme force of this maneuver just crushed Jack's cervical vertebrae, which is the neck. Just crushed it, and it caused him to fall limp and become paralyzed in all extremities, meaning paralyzed in his arms, paralyzed in his legs, paralyzed. So just a horrible, horrific injury. And, we could look at this and we can compare it to other sports cases. Recently, there was a famous sports case with Gweneth Paltro. And the reason the plaintiff lost that case was because it was more of a he said, she said. He said Gweneth Paltro crashed into him. Gweneth Paltro said, I didn't crash into him. I'm skiing, this guy crashes into me. Nobody knows, who's telling the truth and who's lying, right? It could be that Gweneth Paltro is telling the truth, which is ultimately, I think, what the jury found, because they found that this guy did not prove his case. And as a plaintiff, you're almost like a prosecutor. You have to prove your case. Now here you could see it's completely different, right? It's more of a slam dunk case. I'm sure they had witnesses. You have this guy who's an instructor who should use care and caution when working with a novice student. And, he does this maneuver. So it's very different. So I just like to compare, and also there were risks in martial arts, right? Normal risks, but this is not a normal risk of martial arts. And of course, if you're going to do karate, you could get hurt. You're going to ski, you could get hurt. But some things either increase the risk of the sport or the activity, and other things are just not a risk of the sport. This isn't really a risk of the sport. If you're like a student, you're going in for whatever sport, like martial arts, you have this instructor who's a second-degree black belt. You don't think that the guy's gonna paralyze you. I mean, of course he can. Just like if you're going for learning how to shoot a gun, you never shot a gun before. You don't think the instructor's gonna shoot you, right? It's like crazy. So this is just a crazy case, but the lawyers that handled it did a great job. There were, I think, 3 or 4 different lawyers. There were 2 firms. Two firms that co-counseled together. And there was still a lot of work to do. I believe they even hired an expert who was Mr. Gracie, the CEO and head instructor of the Gracie University of Jiu-Jitsu. I think he was maybe their expert as to proper techniques in Jiu-Jitsu. And so it was a very interesting case. It came out to be a $46,475,112.33 verdict, and I'll get into it in a little bit as to how they broke that down. So basically, we talked about what happened. The spinal cord injury was just really, really horrific. Like we talked about, he was paralyzed in all extremities. He had to be hospitalized for months, and he had to be placed on a ventilator. He had to be catheterized. He underwent numerous surgeries, including an anterior cervical discectomy and fusion and a corpectomy at the C5 level. He needed a titanium cage. He needed a posterior spinal fusion from C4 to C6. He suffered multiple strokes because of this. And those left him with, it was a left vertebral artery dissection with basilar artery thrombosis, and it resulted in embolization of the basilar artery and required a left vertebral artery stent. So just just life-changing, horrific injuries. And basically the allegation that the plaintiff's attorneys argued was that they increased the risk, unreasonably increased the risk inherent in the activity of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu by failing to follow the standard of care, and they sought compensation for all of Jack's past and future medical expenses, his loss of earnings, his physical pain, his mental suffering, his loss of enjoyment of life, his disfigurement, his physical impairment, his inconvenience, his grief, his mental anguish, humiliation, emotional distress. So the interesting thing, actually, and this goes to show that a lot of my prior videos, I talk about insurance companies and defense lawyers and how sometimes they're what you could say is like a little bit tone deaf, like they're not really following what's actually happening. So listen to this. At trial, the instructor, this guy whose nickname is Sinistro, he actually testified that he knew his safety obligations, and he knew he had to be safe, and he had to minimize the risk for his white belt student, right? Jack, the novice, and that he failed to do so. So he testified to this on the stand, and he said that he attempted a dangerous move without any control over his student or himself. And, and he basically agreed that, by attempting this dangerous move without any control over myself or my student, what I'm doing is I'm failing to minimize the risk for my student, this white belt, right? So he pretty much admitted that. And despite that, the defense lawyer who's representing the insurance company continued to deny responsibility and minimize the harms. And this guy, Jack, he was like weeks away from graduating from college, starting his career as a professional surf instructor in Costa Rica. And basically his life was just taken away from him. So it just goes to show that even despite this, the defense attorney was still denying. So the San Diego jury took 2 days to deliberate, and they rendered a verdict in favor of Jack, finding the defendants 100% at fault. So that what they found was $637,000 for the past loss of earnings, past and future loss of earnings, $1,337,000 for past medical expenses, And that was actually stipulated because that was, they just showed all the medical expenses. These were past, so they were actual expenses. So both sides stipulated. So that was 1.337 million. And then the jury allowed for 8.5 million for future medical expenses, 11 million for past pain and suffering, and 25 million for future pain and suffering. So it's an interesting case. Let us know what you think. I think that it's very interesting. Sometimes people think like, oh, $50 million verdict. Oh, that's runaway juries. But look, this is a life-changing injury, and they had the proof that this is probably worth more than 50 million. This is somebody's life, a young guy, probably, about to do surfing in Costa Rica. That's what he wants to do. Graduating from college, gonna get married, have kids. Now he's like left in a wheelchair, paralyzed, his arms, paralyzed his legs, these horrible injuries for the rest of his life. And all because of what? All because of clear negligence, just stupidity. I'm sure maybe the guy, the instructor, didn't intend to hurt him that way, but that's what negligence is, right? If you intend to kill somebody, if you take a gun and you intend to shoot somebody, that's criminal. Then you would go to prison. That's criminal. But if you do something that's just, you fail to follow what's known as reasonable safety, and you fail to be reasonably safe, given all the circumstances of the situation, then that's negligence. And this was clear neglect, and this was clear negligence, and it led to a life-changing forever injury. So let us know what you think. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Let us know what other videos you want to see. But I'm going to continue to do these videos about these interesting verdicts. And I thought this one was very interesting because, like I said, it's a sports-related case, but it's very different. And you could see how it's different from other sports cases where somebody gets hit by like a baseball, or because that's a risk of baseball, or like a Gweneth Paltro trial. This is much different, and the result was very, very good. The lawyers are very good. One of the lawyers I actually know, when I was out in Trial Lawyers University, I met with him, and I actually listened to his jury verdict. He did a jury selection, a voir dire lecture. So I like to do a lot of continuing legal education, and I watched his jury selection lecture. It was him and a jury consultant, and they teamed up. He's a very nice guy. So yeah, let us know what you think, and we are here for you. Okay, have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.